Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. If you are new here then welcome. My name is Sarah and today's video is the birth story of Ivy. I have done my birth story of Freddie and I will link that below and up here for you guys to check out if you haven't already. But I've been asked by a few people to film videos on the births of both Freddie and Ivy. I was lucky enough with both of them to have perfectly normal, healthy pregnancy with both of them, and normal delivery with both, and luckily enough to have my birth plan exactly how I wanted it with both of them. So with Ivy, she was due on the Friday, and I remember thinking, I wonder if she'll come on her due date like Freddie did. He was born on his due date, because I remember thinking, if she was born on her due date, I wonder what the statistics for that are, that a person that's had two children born on their due dates, I wonder if the percentage is like, if it's even a percent or if it's like a point something of a percent. I just thought it'd be quite interesting to see what that would be like. But she was due on the Friday, and I had a midwife appointment, and she came to the house. She said she'd give me a sweep. It was the same midwife I had with Freddie, so she's like, I'll see if I can work my magic again. And she came to give me a sweep. I'm trying to think, because it was the Friday, I'm trying to think. I think my mother-in-law, either my mother-in-law or my stepmum was here, because they were occupying Freddie downstairs. It might have been my dad and stepmum. I think that's what happened. Anyway, we came upstairs. I'd prepped Mark's side of the bed this time, after the water breaking incident last time on the mattress. So I'd prepped everything, and she gave me a sweep, and she tried to see if I was dilated at all, and she said, oh, you're only 2 centimetres dilated. She said, but I think she said the membrane is really thin, so she said, I'll try and break your waters again if you want. So I was like, oh, okay then. And she tried, and it was really uncomfortable. So she said, oh, we'll give it one more go. If not, she said, I'll come back on Sunday. If you haven't had a baby by then, I'll come back on Sunday and give you another sweep. She said, but let me try again. So right, okay, she tried again, and still my waters didn't break or anything. And I remember I started to cry, and she said, oh, I'm really sorry, I didn't want it to hurt, I didn't mean to hurt you that much. I said, oh, I'm not crying because it hurt. I'm crying because I'm frustrated that the same thing hasn't happened again. I said, I just had this expectation in my head that the same thing would happen and I'd get to have them both on their due date. I said, it's nothing to do with you, don't worry. So she said, basically go for a walk, because I'd been having contractions from the Thursday night. So the night before my due date, I'd started to have contractions, which was new to me because I didn't have contractions with Freddie until after my waters broke. So it was like the other way around this time around. So I was a little bit disheartened, because I thought my contractions have started, so it must mean something. But I was only 2 centimetres when she gave me the sweep. So she said, go and have a walk, and she gave me a prescription for some like a constipation suppository, pessary, whichever one goes up, whichever one that is. She said, because she said you're a little bit constipated, so that'll help when it comes to childbirth. So she said, go up and walk, because of where we're situated. We're in a dip, so when if we want to walk up to the shop, it's all uphill. So she said that will help move things along as well. So I was like, right, okay. So she left, went downstairs, said to my dad and Irene, so it was them. She's given me a prescription to go and get these constipation things. She said if we go for a walk, that will help the baby move along. And obviously since Thursday night I've been having contractions on and off, not constant, but I'd been having them on and off. I'd get them for like 3 or 4 hours, then they would stop, then I'd get them like hour and a half later, and then they would stop. So we were like, let's go off up to the shop. So Dad took the dog and I went marching up, having to stop every now and again for contractions, timing them on my phone. Obviously I'd rung Mark and told him. I was upset when I rang him, and he was like, don't worry, she'll come when she's ready, which is like, I thought, well, that's not bloody helpful, because I don't want her to come when she's ready. I want her to come when I'm ready, and I'm ready now. So walked up to the chemist, and I remember being stood in the queue, clearly heavily pregnant, and there was a bloke behind me that said, oh lovely, do you know what you're having? Yes, I'm having a girl. Or when are you due? And I said today, and it was literally like everybody in the queue just took a step back, like it was catching, or that if they stood close to me that could trigger the baby coming. It was quite funny. They were like, oh right, okay. And I had Freddie in his little push along bike things, so they were a little bit like, and he's yours as well, which I still get now, to be honest, which irritates me a little bit, because people always assume that because they're close together that Ivy was an accident. It was like, she wasn't an accident, she was planned. Don't have to be rude though. So obviously got the medication, walked back down, having contractions. They're coming a bit stronger, so I thought, ooh, maybe something will happen a bit later on. And my midwife had said to me as she left, I've got a feeling about Sunday. It's going to be Sunday, the 17th, 2017. Sounds good. It's got a ring to it. So she's like, it's going to happen on Sunday. So like, oh man, that means I've got another 2 days to it. But I was like, right, trying everything. So we were walking, and I got back to the house, and I was trying like to do some cleaning, and Friday went and nothing had happened. So Saturday, Freddie had a swimming lesson. So in Penarth, just the other side of Cardiff. So it's a good 45-minute drive away from our house, which meant that it was over an hour away from the birth centre. But I said to Mark, I'm not going to go in the pool. So I was like, well, you go in the pool and I'll sit on the side. And I remember people looking at me, knowing, because obviously we went every week, we'd made friends, and they were looking at me knowing that I was due on the day before, and they were like, are you sure it's why it's coming here? I was like, I'm walking this baby out. I don't care. And then after the swimming classes, my in-laws came with us. We decided to go to IKEA. I was like, I'm going to walk around, and if my waters will go in IKEA, maybe they'll give me something. I was like, oh, I want a new corner sofa, so if I bounce up and down on the corner sofa my waters break, maybe they'll give me the corner sofa. Because you hear stories, don't you, about people's waters going in Asda and them getting a year's free shopping or whatever. I don't know how true that is, but I was like, oh, maybe I'll just like, my waters will go and I'll give birth in an entire IKEA kitchen, and I can have a new kitchen or something. So yeah, we went to IKEA afterwards and walked around, but they went round IKEA, and I was getting a bit out of breath, having contractions. So I went and sat down. Freddie was in the trolley, and I sat down, and my father-in-law came along with Freddie in the trolley, sat next to me, and we were waiting for Mark and his mum, and we'd taken a shortcut to avoid like this one section, but Mark took his mum all the way around there, so we were waiting ages, and I was trying to ring them, but it's quite, obviously when you're in somewhere like that, it's quite loud, and neither of them were answering their phones, and I was like, I'm getting quite uncomfortable now, I just want to go. Couldn't get hold of them. Eventually they turned up. I think it was about 10 minutes that they took to go all the way around, because his mum was like, oh wow, look at all this kitchenware. She's been looking for certain shaped cake tins and she couldn't find them anywhere, but they had them in IKEA, and she was amazed at all the stuff that they had. It was quite sweet. But they eventually turned up. I was like, we need to go because I'm getting uncomfortable. So we came back home, still having contractions, timing them, and Saturday went and nothing happened. So by this point I'm like, right, Sunday morning, I'm 2 days overdue. I was so upset. I was just crying at the drop of the hat. Obviously pregnancy hormones anyway, and I'm an emotional person, so you can imagine an emotional person with pregnancy hormones just cries at anything. So the Sunday, and I was like, right, midwife's coming today, I'm gonna make her break my waters. So midwife turned up, she did the checks, blood pressure, measured, and she gave me a sweep and she said, right, you're now 3 centimetres. She said, I can't break your waters. So we went through the whole process again. Basically the same thing happened that happened on Friday. She was like, don't get upset. She's like, it won't be long, it really won't be long. She said, but what I would suggest is as soon as you start having like intense contractions to the point that you can't, like that they're really intense, she said, I suggest you ring the birth centre and tell them how quickly you had Freddie, because they'll want you to come in straight away and tell them that how many centimetres I am from what she told me and all this blah blah blah. So off she went, and we carried on our Sunday. I think we went for a walk with, when I was pregnant with Freddie, every night for about a week before his due date I walked around the estate. So we did that, we walked around the estate. A month before I was due with Ivy, Freddie learned to walk, which was really nice of him, just what I needed, heavily pregnant, chasing a toddler who's just learned to walk, so that was fun. But it just meant that it took longer, so I was out walking for longer and whatever. And then it was about, I think it was about 5:30 on the Sunday evening, and I started to get quite uncomfortable contractions. I remember saying to Mark, I'm going to go and lie down on the bed upstairs because they're getting quite painful. So I came up here and I lay down, and I remember I lay like, so I lay this way rather than this way, I laid this way, and they were getting quite uncomfortable, and I remember he came upstairs to start Freddie's bedtime routine, so he bathed him and put him to bed, and he came in to see me and he was like, are you okay? I was like, they're coming like thick and fast, you need to ring. So he messaged my midwife, because she told me she was in the on the maternity ward at the hospital, not the birth centre, the hospital, and that if we needed her to just message and then she'd ring me when she could. So Mark messaged her saying that, you know, what was happening, I was having contractions like this, blah blah blah. So then she rang me and she was like, right, she's like, Mark said she doesn't want to talk to you, she's just trying to focus getting through the contractions. So she said, right, well you need to ring the birth centre now and tell them that you're coming in, because how quickly Freddie happened, the second, they say your second, the third and whatever are quicker. So I was like, if she's much quicker than Freddie, then it could happen at any moment. So Mark rang the birth centre and they were like, yeah, come on down. But we were like, well, we can't, we've got to wait for somebody to come and be with Freddie and the dog, because we can't just go and leave him, and we certainly didn't want to wake him up for him to come to hospital while I had a baby. So we rang my dad and Irene again, because it was a Sunday night. Obviously the Monday, Mark's mum and dad had to go to work, so I was like, I don't want to ring them to stay here, I don't know how long we're going to be, I don't want to be coming home at 4 o'clock in the morning and sending them home when they've got to go to work. So we rang my dad. They were supposed to be in Lanzarote, but they postponed it by 3 weeks so that they could be here for Ivy being born. I remember my dad asking me if I could give him a more specific date of when the baby was going to come. Could I ask the midwife to be more specific, which I thought was hilarious. I was like, yeah Dad, that's totally how having a baby works. So they came, but we had to wait for them to come, because at this point I think it was about 6:30, 7 o'clock. So we had to wait for them to come, and they live about, well, we can get there in 25 minutes, but my dad and Irene take longer than that. Plus obviously they had to finish doing whatever they were doing, get dressed if they were in their pyjamas or whatever. Anyway, they ended up turning up within about half an hour, so they must have gone pretty quick, to be fair. And I remember them getting here, and then I was explaining everything to them, and I remember Mark like dancing on his feet like he needed a wee, like, are we gonna go? And I was like, oh yeah, I was just having a chat with them as if they turn up for a cup of coffee or something. So we got in the car and off we went to the birth centre again, and I was timing my contractions on my phone in the car, and we were quite lucky both times. The times that we went to the birth centre, the rows were really empty. Obviously by the time we went to the birth centre with Ivy, it was after, well, it was a Sunday for a start, but it was also like after work time, you know, so it was like, it was getting, well, it was dark, yeah, it was dark, and we turned up to the birth centre, and this time I walked in and I walked up the stairs because I thought this is going to help. So I was walking up the stairs sideways, because that's what they say it does to help your cervix open, is to move your pelvis sideways. So rather than walking up the stairs facing forward, if you step up sideways, that's supposed to help apparently. So that's what I was doing, and then we got in there and they measured me, and I can't remember if she said, I think she said I was like 4 centimetres, and I showed her the contractions on my phone, and she was just like, okay, we'll just see how it goes, we won't initiate anything yet. And then I remember walking about for a bit. Mark went back to the car to get them. I remember thinking, this is going to be the time when we have the babies, when he's gone off to the bloody car to get the bags, but that didn't happen. And I remember there being a TV. We were in exactly the same room that we were when we had Freddie, and there was a TV in there. And I remember looking at the time thinking, oh, it's 10 to 9. Victoria's on at 9 o'clock. And I remember looking at Mark saying, we've got it on record, haven't we? I was like, because I don't want to start watching it and then end up having to go and have a baby. And he was like, yeah, that's fine. So I remember that. And then I remember going back and sitting on the edge of the bed, and the midwife coming back in, and she was asking how we were doing, and then I was talking away to her, and then I'd stop to focus on the contraction. And I remember she said this was about, I think this was about 11 o'clock in the night then. And I remember she said to me, I think, I can't remember the exact words she used, but I thought it was a really odd thing, like as if I was some kind of like robot, is the way I felt. She was like, right, I think we shall initiate the next stage, or something like that, she said. Oh, that's my tummy rumbling. I do apologise. And I think that was like her way of saying that I'm in like advanced labour, so like we'll get you in the process. She's like, right, we'll go fill up the pool. So she filled up the pool, obviously in between the time for me arriving and all this happened. They come in and check the baby's heartbeat, and she was doing fine. And I remember the pool was ready, so we got in the pool, and by this point it was 11:30, quarter to midnight, something like that, and Mark had been up since 4:30 with Freddie that morning, so he was absolutely exhausted. So he was like drifting asleep in the chair, so I thought, well, I'm not going to wake him up because nothing's happening yet, I'm just having contractions. When I get the urge to push, I'll wake him up. So I let him have a doze and whatever, and the midwife was just sat next to me. Then I remember it being quite uncomfortable, and I was swapping positions, and I remember saying to her, like, all of a sudden, it must have been, well, I know what it was just before 1:45 in the morning, so this would be on the Monday morning, and all of a sudden I just looked at her and I said, I feel sick, I feel like I'm going to be sick. And she said, yeah, don't worry, I'll go and get you a bowl. So she came back with the little kidney bowls and whatever, and I was being sick, at which point Mark had woken up, and he is just such a baby when it comes to sick. He had to leave the room because he was going to be sick if he could hear me and see me being sick. So he left the room, went back into the room with the bed, and I don't know what he was doing in there, playing on his phone or something to distract him from what was going on. And I kept being sick and kept being sick, and I ran out of bowls. So the midwife left to go and get me some more bowls. I think Mark must have thought I'd finished being sick, because I remember he came back in, so he was in the room, but there was no midwife. And then I must have had one bowl left, because I remember I was sick into the bowl, and the pressure of me being sick not only broke my waters, because I felt it was like the relief of the waters going, but also her head came out straight away. And I remember with Freddie, I was chilled and calm. I didn't make any noise whatsoever, no grunting, no screaming, no swearing. I literally was silent as I did it. I just went into myself. But I remember with Ivy, that happened, and I think because I knew there was no midwife in the room, I panicked a little bit. And I remember saying, like, my waters have broke, her head's out, her head's out. And because I was turned away, Mark was sat like there, I was turned away. I don't actually know what his face was like, but I like to imagine it was kind of like, oh, I'm gonna have to deliver a baby. But the midwife was only in the room in between the water, like where the water birth room was. There's like a little gully way that had the bathroom, and then all their cupboards with their medical stuff, and then the bedroom. So she was only in that bit getting some more dishes, and she came running in thinking, over dramatic mum, looked, and there was the baby's head, and she was like, oh crumbs, obviously you're supposed to have 2 midwives deliver with you where you can. So she shouted for the other midwife that was back down in the bedroom, by which point I had had another contraction and Ivy had come out, and they were like, oh my word, that happened so fast. Plopped her on me. She didn't cry, like Freddie didn't cry, but then she did after like about a minute. She cried of her own accord rather than the midwives making her cry. And I just remember thinking, that just happened so fast. And they were saying, oh my god, how quickly that was, and blah blah blah. And we did the delayed clamping again. And I remember when they gave her to me, and I looked at her, and I just started crying, and I looked over at Mark, and I was like, that is Freddie. She was like the image of Freddie. And I was like, it's literally like last year all over again. And then once the cord had stopped, Mark cut it again, and then he held her while they did the whole placenta thing. But this time, rather than me getting out and sitting on a beanbag in the same room as the water birth, I kind of did the John Wayne walk back into the bedroom, so I was on the bed. And then they delivered the placenta on the bed, and then that's when they said to Mark, do you want to see it? So obviously I had to look again. As I mentioned in my last video, definitely look at your placenta, because it's the most amazing thing ever. The fact that your body can grow another organ that can sustain a life and build a life, it just blows my mind. So they said to Mark, do you want to have a look? And he was like, yeah, okay. So he had a look. He was like, oh, that's really cool. Slightly gross, but really cool. And then they got rid of it and did whatever they do with it. And then Mark tried feeding her with the little bottles, because I had said point blank I'm not breastfeeding, because I tried with Freddie and I hadn't actually produced anything, no colostrum, no milk, absolutely nothing, which made me feel quite sad. But on the plus point, I didn't get the hard painful boobs. My boobs just didn't hurt at all, so I was like, oh, that's a plus side. Then they examined me, and they said I only had like a tiny tear. It's like, it doesn't need any stitches, that's fine. And she said the only reason I probably had that was because if I'd had a tear before with Freddie, she said, but it's so tiny, so it doesn't need a stitch, it will just heal on its own. So that was good, I didn't need stitches that time. And then they left us to do our bonding, and we did the obviously applicable photos and phone call. Well, we didn't ring anybody because of the time, but we messaged the grandparents, and Mark's mum had stayed awake. She couldn't fall asleep, even though like obviously we messaged her that we were going in to hospital, but she'd stayed awake, she couldn't sleep, so she was happy and she finally got to go to sleep then. Obviously let my dad and Irene know, who they stayed here, and then they came back in, and then they weighed her and gave her the injection, vitamin K injection, and gave her back to us, and she was £7.12, so she was 3 ounces lighter than Freddie, but she had just creeped, because it was just past midnight, at 1:45 in the morning, she'd creeped into 3 days over. So she was, if she'd have been born on her due date, she obviously would have probably been a little bit lighter. So yeah, she was smaller than Freddie, but then they tend to say girls are smaller than boys anyway, so they were both a nice weight. And then I remember they came back in to see if we wanted anything to eat. The canteen had closed obviously at that time, but they had like leftover sandwiches in like the big fridges that would just be chucked out. So they were like, oh, do you want, so they're going out a date tomorrow, they'll be thrown, or like that day, that morning, they'd be thrown and replaced with fresh ones. But she was like, you can have a sandwich. So we both had, both me and Mark had a sandwich. And then I asked them, oh, we'd like to stay the night, can we move into the family room? So they were like, yeah, no problem. So we moved into a room then that had a double bed and one of the little hospital cots, and we stayed overnight. Well, I say overnight, we were just stayed until the morning, and we went home the same day she was born, but we stayed there. Does that make sense? Rather than with Freddie, we went home within a couple of hours of having him. We stayed in a family room, and you know what I mean. Anyway, Mark went to sleep, but I think I still had like the adrenaline, and I didn't sleep at all. Ivy did not like the cot at all. We put her in there, we swaddled her up, and she just didn't like it. Every time, like, I'd pick her up to shush her, try and feed her, see if that's what she wanted. She didn't want milk or anything, she literally just wanted me. So I had her on my chest until I think I woke Mark up about 6 in the morning, because I was just like, I'm exhausted. Like, the tiredness had hit me then. I was like, I'm exhausted, but I've literally been up all night, I haven't slept. So I had got up on the Sunday morning. I think Mark had obviously let me have a lie-in, so I think I got up about 8. And he'd been up since 4:30 with Freddie, but so I'd been up from 8 o'clock in the morning, so I'd been up nearly 24 hours, and in that time I'd had a baby. So I was quite tired, so I woke him up and I was like, I just need a shower to refresh myself and make myself feel better. So he was like, yeah, no problem. So he had Ivy, and I had a shower, and then while I was having a shower, I think they must have had a shift change at 7, and somebody else came in, and Mark said, oh, she's just having a shower, and I said, oh, if somebody comes in, can you, one, ask them about breakfast, but also ask when we'll be able to go home, because that night I had Ivy was the first night I'd ever spent away from Freddie, so I was quite, now I'd had the baby, I was quite anxious to get back to him. Obviously the whole having a baby process had taken my mind off being away from him, but now that she was here, I just wanted to get home and see him. So Mark asked about that, and they said, yeah, we've just got to do the paperwork, and we'll let you go home. So I came out from having a shower. I messaged my dad and Irene, who had stayed here with Freddie, and said, you know, how is he? Everything okay? They were like, yeah, he was just having breakfast. I think they sent me pictures of him having Weetabix in high chair or something. We've told him that that his sister's here, and that Mummy and Daddy are in the hospital with her, and that they'll be coming home soon, and all this. And then obviously everybody was starting to wake up, all our friends and stuff, so they'd seen the messages that we'd sent at 1 o'clock in the morning, so they were phoning and messaging, and we were just going through all that, and obviously the obligatory Facebook post that people do. And then the only bad thing about us staying over in the birth centre that time, because I kind of regretted with Freddie that we came home the same day and that we didn't stay over. That's why I wanted to stay over with Ivy. But the only thing I regretted was that because Ivy was born in the busiest month, every midwife will tell you September is the busiest month, because everybody said, a couple of midwives said, I wish people would stop shagging at Christmas, because that's how you get a September baby. so they just were inundated, the amount of people. I mean, when we had Freddie, we didn't see another soul. Did not see another soul at all. Didn't hear anybody. But with Ivy, when I was in the bed with her cuddling when Mark was sleeping, I heard 3 babies being born in that time, 3 separate babies. So it's super busy, so they had so much paperwork and stuff to do that it took so long for us to get home. They started our, like, I don't know if it's called like signing off paper, whatever it's called, like to discharge us at 7:30 in the morning, and we weren't allowed to leave until, I think we left at just before 12, lunchtime. We were offered lunch, but we declined. We were offered lunch, like to pick lunch at like 10:30, but we thought we're not going to be here for lunch, so we won't have anything. And we were still there, and we were absolutely starving. So we eventually got to come home. And I remember my sister and her boyfriend had turned up, and we'd got home after them, I think. And Freddie was so excited to see us, and I remember I'd given Ivy to somebody I can't remember who, Mark or Dad or Irene, but I remember going to pick Freddie up and thinking he weighed an absolute ton. I mean, up to literally the day I started having contractions, the day I went into hospital or the birth centre, I was picking Freddie up, swinging him around, thinking that he didn't weigh anything. But after having Ivy and feeling like this tiny little weight again, I couldn't pick Freddie. I literally couldn't pick him up. I thought he had like lead in his shoes. He was that heavy. But yeah, that was my birth experience with Ivy, our second baby. And hopefully, if we end up having a third, we will either be going back to the birth centre again if everything goes well, or I may persuade Mark for us to have a home birth. So fingers crossed we have another baby, whether he lets me or not, I don't know. But thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed it, then please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you on the next video. Bye guys!